Hey there. So you're about to dive into the chapter on dental metals, right? Well, think of this as your pre-flight check. We're going to build a solid mental blueprint of all the core concepts, so when you actually start reading, you'll already have the big picture locked in. Let's get into it.
Here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about why any of this actually matters in the real world, in the clinic. Then, we're going to zoom way down to the atomic level to see how a metal is born. After that, we'll look at how we can toughen them up, why we almost always mix them together to make alloys, and finally, how to read the blueprint that tells us everything about them. By the end, you'll have a rock-solid framework for the whole chapter.
All right, first things first. Why on earth do we need to study metallurgy? Simple. Because from the instruments you're holding in your hand to the crowns you're placing in a patient's mouth, metals are, quite literally, the foundation of so much of what we do in dentistry every single day.
And this is really the central question, isn't it? It's not good enough for a metal to just be a metal. For our purposes, it needs to hit this perfect trifecta of properties. It has to be strong enough not to break when you're chewing, it has to be workable, or what we call ductile, so we can shape it precisely, and of course, it has to be safe to live inside a person's mouth for years. The science we're about to cover is all about how we achieve that perfect balance.
And I mean, you see this in action everywhere. We're talking about the steel alloy in your instruments, the nickel titanium and orthodontic wires, the gold or chromium alloys in crowns and inlays, the bases for dentures, and of course, dental amalgam fillings. Metals and their mixtures, alloys, are all over the place. So understanding this stuff isn't just academic, it's incredibly practical.
Okay, so to really get how a metal behaves on a large scale, we have to understand how it's built from the ground up. So let's shrink ourselves down and watch what happens at the microscopic level when a metal cools from a hot liquid into a solid.
This whole process is called crystallization. It all starts with these tiny little solid specks called nuclei forming in the molten metal, usually around impurities. Then, from these little starting points, crystals start to grow outwards in these beautiful tree-like structures called dendrites. They just keep growing and growing until, bam, they run into each other, and the whole thing is packed together as a solid.
Now, each one of those individual crystals that formed is called a grain. And the line where two different grains crash into each other, that's called a grain boundary. You can think of these boundaries as internal walls inside the metal. And they are super important because they mess up the perfect crystal pattern, making it harder for things to shift around. This is a huge reason why a metal with lots of small grains is usually stronger than one with a few big ones.
Now here's a twist that sounds completely backwards at first. When it comes to metals, perfection is actually a bad thing. A perfectly ordered crystal would be brittle. The secret to a metal's strength and its ability to be shaped lies in its mistakes, in its imperfections.
And the most important imperfection is called a dislocation. Honestly, the best way to picture this is to think about moving a giant, heavy carpet. You don't try to pull the whole thing at once, right? No way. You make a little wrinkle or a ruck in one end, and you just push that ruck all the way across. That's a dislocation. Applying force to a metal just moves these little rucks through the atomic lattice, and that's what allows the metal to bend and change shape instead of just snapping.
Okay, so metals have this natural structure with grains and dislocations, but, we can do better than nature. We can take that structure and deliberately manipulate it with force and with heat to get the exact properties we're looking for.
So, when we bend, roll, or draw a metal at room temperature, that's called cold working. You start with these nice, roughly circular grains, but as you work it, those grains get squashed, stretched, and tangled up, forming a fibrous structure. What's the result? The metal gets way harder and stronger. But there's always a trade-off. It also becomes less ductile, meaning it's more likely to crack if you try to bend it any further. This whole process is called work hardening.
And here is the perfect dental example. You know that springiness you need in an orthodontic wire? That's pure work hardening in action. The wire has been drawn through a tiny hole, which creates that strong, fibrous grain structure that gives it the power to apply a nice, steady force to move teeth.
But what happens if you make a metal too hard and brittle from work hardening? Well, you can basically hit the reset button with heat. If you heat a metal up past a certain point, it triggers something called recrystallization. New, stress-free grains start to grow, which makes the metal soft again and brings back its ductility. We can also use gentler heat treatments like stress relief annealing just to get rid of any internal stresses without changing the properties. And homogenization is a special treatment for alloys that we'll touch on in a bit. Each heat treatment is a specific tool for a specific outcome.
So we've been talking a lot about pure metals, but here's the thing. In dentistry, we almost never use a pure metal for anything structural. Why? Because you can get much better properties by mixing different metals together to create an alloy.
So an alloy is just a mix of metals. And the most common kind you'll read about is a solid solution. This is where the atoms of the different metals all jumble together and share the same crystal lattice structure.
So why does mixing metals make them stronger? Okay, let's go back to our ruck in the carpet analogy. Moving that ruck was pretty easy on a nice smooth floor. But what if the floor was covered in random tiles of different sizes and shapes? That ruck is going to get stuck all the time, right? That's exactly what happens in an alloy. When you mix in atoms of a different size, they distort the perfect crystal lattice, creating all these little roadblocks. The dislocations have a much harder time moving, and that makes the whole material stronger. This is a super powerful effect, and it's called solution hardening.
All right, this brings us to the ultimate cheat sheet for anyone working with alloys, the phase diagram. Now I know they can look pretty intimidating at first, but trust me, it's just a map. It's a blueprint that tells you exactly what state an alloy will be in, liquid, solid, or a mix, at any given temperature and composition.
Let's start with a really important difference. If you look at a cooling curve, a pure metal freezes at one single temperature. You see that flat plateau? That's its melting point. But an alloy, a solid solution alloy anyway, is different. It freezes over a range of temperatures. So on its cooling curve, you see a slope, not a flat line.
A phase diagram is basically built around this idea. You'll see two key lines. The top one is the liquidus line. Above this line, your alloy is 100% liquid. The bottom line is the solidus line. Below this line, your alloy is 100% solid. And in between the two, well, that's the slushy zone, where you've got a mix of both solid and liquid.
So let's follow an alloy as it cools down. The instant it hits that liquidus line, the very first solid crystals start to form. But, and this is the critical part, those first crystals have a different recipe than the liquid they came from. They are richer in whichever metal has the higher melting point. As it keeps cooling through that slushy zone, the crystals that form keep changing their composition. By the time you finally hit the solidus line, the very last drop of liquid to freeze is now rich in the lower melting point metal. This creates a grain that's not uniform, a bit like a gobstopper with layers. It's called coring, and it can weaken an alloy. Now, there is a very cool exception to this freezing range rule. It's called a eutectic alloy. At one very specific composition, the alloy acts just like a pure metal and freezes at a single temperature. This property of melting so cleanly, and often at a lower temperature than either of its ingredients, makes them perfect for things like dental solders.
All right, we've gone from a single atom all the way up to complex alloy blueprints. Let's pull all this together into a simple framework that you can carry with you as you start reading the chapter.
As you read, just keep this little mental checklist handy. 1. How do metals solidify through crystallization to form grains? 2. How do we change that structure with work hardening to make them stronger? 3. Why do we mix metals to make alloys? Hint, it's all about blocking those dislocations. And 4. How do we use phase diagrams as a map to predict how an alloy is going to behave? If you have these 4 big ideas in your head, you've got the foundation for the entire chapter.
So, I'll leave you with a question to think about. Now that you have the blueprint, what would you want the phase diagram to look like for a dental solder versus what you'd want for a super high-strength crown? The answer is hiding in everything we've just talked about. Good luck with the reading.